All right, it looks like we're tapering off. So I want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We'll go ahead and get started. My name is Emily Gutierrez. I'm an International Studies Advisor with CIEE. If you are from New York or California, you've probably talked to me a lot during this process, but I support high school students on all of our study abroad programs. And I'm really excited to welcome you all. Congratulations on being accepted for summer 2021. The purpose of this evening is for you. We know that this is a huge decision to study abroad and that this is a really remarkable year. And, rightly so, you probably have a ton of questions. And so what I would really appreciate is I'm going to go through some just really important overview, like big level things that apply to all of you as recently accepted students. So I would ask for you to hold off on asking your questions because chances are some of those, big questions I'm going to address in the next 15 minutes. And then I'm going to leave a ton of time at the end for anything that you want me to go into more detail about or anything that wasn't clear. Those really small, like personal, this is only going to apply to me questions. I would save those. Our team, we are available to talk to you one-on-one, but a lot of you, your questions tend to be really similar. And so we really want to make sure that this time is useful for everyone. So once I go through the presentation, you can use that Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and you can type your questions in there. There's also a way for you to vote on questions. So if someone asks something that you didn't even think about and you're like, yes, Emily needs to answer this before I leave tonight, please, you can vote on questions, and that just helps us figure out what it is you want to learn more about in our time together. So let's go ahead and get started. And this is a webinar, so you don't have to worry about like accidentally turning on your camera. You're all good. You can just see me. I can't see you. Same for being muted. There's no chance of you unmuting yourself. So just wanted to throw that out there. So welcome to CIEE. I always like to start by saying that this is a really competitive process. And for a lot of you, this is the first time that you are applying for something like a scholarship. And so, I really want to just take a second. This is an incredible year. A lot of you had to do this work completely on your own without any help from your teachers. So being accepted during this scholarship round is even more of an honor. And so we're just really excited, in looking over your essay responses, we're really excited to welcome you to CIEE and have you hopefully study abroad with us this summer. I think it's a really special type of student who chooses to seek out these type of opportunities, but even more so in a time like this. So some helpful information in the chat box now. My colleague Pierre is actually going to put a link. So a lot of you, maybe you did a lot of research before you applied to CIEE. Maybe you didn't. So maybe you've been accepted to a program that you don't know a ton about and you want to learn more. A great place to start is our website. This is, all of our programs have a program profile, which you can find from our main page. So that link is in the chat box now. So I would really suggest, if you haven't already, to go onto that page and find the program that you were accepted to. There's different tabs there. You can see the daily life. You can read blogs from previous participants. We have a sample week of activities of what you can expect while you're on program, because that's the most common question I get from students and parents is like, what does this look like on a day-to-day? And these resources are there for you to help give you a sense of what your program is really all about. So just wanted to make sure that everyone knew where that was. I know our website can be a little overwhelming because we have so many different types of programs, but that link in the chat box will take you to our high school summer programs only, where you can search for the one that you were just accepted to. This is also where you can always double check your dates, and your dates also live in your CIEE portal, and I'll show you how to double check that as well. So what we're going to cover really briefly is how we are planning for summer 2021. We know, again, this is a really unique year, so we want to address some of the big questions that you might have. And I also just want to walk you through, if you are planning to travel with us, how you let us know about that before the deadline next week to confirm. So we have been busy all year planning for this really unique summer, and we're really excited to share how this is going to look. So this is our map of where we are currently running summer 2021 programming. So it's really extraordinary, I think, to me, seeing, what is possible. After a year, we're feeling like so much was impossible. I actually just recently returned. I've been working in Monteverde, Costa Rica for the past 4 weeks on one of our programs. And so I'm just really hopeful for what this summer is going to bring for our students. You will notice there are some locations on this map, like Australia, Czech Republic, Germany, and China, that you have been accepted to, but we have not shared your exact scholarship amount yet. The reason is we're just being realistic. Based on what we've seen in this past year, we are not optimistic about them reopening their border for travel this summer. Doesn't mean it couldn't happen in the next few weeks, but we just want to be transparent about that. And so for students who are accepted to those 4 locations, we're just asking you to hold tight for a few weeks. We'll see if there's any movement with our contacts in country. And based on what happens in the next few weeks, we will communicate what your options are for the scholarship that you received from us. I know that's like kind of the same message you've been getting, like just wait and see, but that's just where we're at. So I hope you understand. For everyone else, you have gotten your award. It doesn't mean that your country is 100% open to travel at this time, but it means that we are planning as if we can run the programs this summer and monitoring the situation closely, and we will be updating you every step of the way of any changes that come up as we get closer to departure. So some things that we already have in place and know based on where we are at right now and the programs that we have run throughout the course of this year. So a common question that I get asked is, will I be required to be vaccinated in order to study abroad on a CIEE program? The answer is no. We are not requiring that of our participants. And if a country is requiring that, and it's the country that you've been accepted to go on, that will be a consideration of us being able to run that program. If we know most of our students cannot be vaccinated, it's not a viable program, and it will likely be canceled by CIEE. Even if a country does not require this, we do require that you take a COVID test 72 hours prior to departure, and you will upload those test results into your CIEE account for us to verify before you travel. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind now. Depending on where you live, it is a little bit of a journey to get a COVID test and get that turnaround within 72 hours. We ask all students to limit their exposure 10 days prior to their program departing, especially once they take their COVID tests, because again, we want that test result to be an accurate representation of your health, and we want to keep the program and the participants as safe as possible. So that means no big going away party with your whole extended family right before you get on a plane and go meet your group in Spain. If the government, so I've gotten this question a ton this week, like right now there's a 2-week mandatory quarantine for my program. Am I going to be expected to do this? If there is a mandatory quarantine at the time that our program is about to depart, it's a big indication that the program will be canceled. Especially for programs that are 3 weeks long, if we're having a 2-week quarantine, it's not much of a program for our students. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the slides. One thing we will be doing on all of our programs, whether or not the government requires it or not, is we'll be having what we call a soft isolation for the first 7 days of the program. So what that means is, even if you're on a program that has 50 students, you're not going to be interacting with all 50 students on those first 7 days. You are going to be interacting with a small group of about 10 to 15 students and 1 adult to keep our mixing around as limited as possible. Our staff will be monitoring students during that time to make sure, if anyone is showing any signs or any symptoms, we can isolate that student and tend to them so that it doesn't spread throughout the group. During this time, there will not be in-person classes indoors. Classes will either be remote or they will be outside with that small group cohort. In terms of housing, so our summer programs this year, they're split up into two different types of programs. So we have our language and culture programs, which are 4 weeks long, and we have our global discovery programs, which are 3 weeks long. So if you've been accepted to a language and culture program, your program is having a homestay component, which means you'll be living with a local family for the 4 weeks that you are abroad. So you will have your own bedroom in your host family's home for this program. And if you're on a global discovery program, that means that you'll be living in what we call shared accommodations. So maybe you'll be living in a dorm or a hostel or a hotel as a group with your chaperones. So for that first week of your program, you will have your own bedroom. After that week of soft lockdown, that's when you'll have a roommate, if you are going to have a roommate on your program. Even in a non-COVID year, a big question that just all of my participants ask is like, who are these host families? Who is this family that I'm going to be living with for a month? Like, I don't want to live with these strangers. Even though the host family becomes the best part of the program, you know, parents naturally are always asking, is it safe? So all of our host families, whether this is their first time working with CIEE or they've been with us for years, everyone gets a home check from our local staff. One of the great things about CIEE programs is that our programs are run by our local staff who live and work in the locations full time, and we have study centers there. So it means we have ties to the local communities. Our study centers do the homestay visit, they do the background checks on all of the adults who live in the host family's home, and then you as the student and the parent, each of you fill out a survey about your experience living with that host family every time we have a student on program. So we're constantly collecting the most up-to-date data about the families that our students are staying with. Especially with this year, our host families are aware of the requirements to host students given these times. So that means we are asking them to limit their exposure to people outside of the home as much as possible. It means that we are not having frontline emergency workers like, you know, doctors working in the ER. They are not hosting students this summer. The host family knows that if someone, including the student, falls ill, we are quarantining together as a group for the duration, and they're responsible for looking after your child while they're with them. Hotel and dorm considerations, we discussed that, but students will have their own room and own bathroom. And then we also have contingency plans in place to support students who would require self-isolation should they get sick. So that includes not only the host family, but our local staff and our chaperones who are prepared to escort students to anything that they need, including any doctor's appointments or anything related to COVID-19 or just general health. This is the reality on our programs, even in a normal summer, but especially this year. In terms of classes, so for my language and culture students, your class schedule is very structured. You have language class 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday. So like I said, for that first week, you will either be in an online class or you'll be taking class with a small group, not indoors. After that soft isolation ends, you will be in classroom. The classroom will be up to local standards in terms of spacing and ventilations. You will be wearing masks. And there is a possibility if there is, you know, a tightening of restrictions while you are abroad, that we would have to shift classes to be online if that is what local authorities required at the time that your program was running. So that's just something we want to be transparent about. We always adhere to local restrictions in place for our programs, and we don't want to feel like, you know, you didn't understand that that was a possibility prior to going on your program. In terms of excursions, so we are going to be prioritizing. The great thing is it's going to be summer, so there's a lot to do and a lot to see with being outdoors in a lot of the locations that we're going to. Some programs, they're like entirely outdoors anyway. When I think about Portugal and I think about Costa Rica and those marine biology programs. This year especially, outdoor activities will be prioritized. Again, small groups broken up to be socially distant, especially in that first week of soft isolation. The reality is that, especially on language and culture programs in major cities, especially in Europe, students have to get themselves to and from class. So they will be taking public transportation this summer. I live in New York City, and so I've even had students during this year who, when we were doing hybrid learning, were taking the subway to get to school during this pandemic. So they must wear masks on public transportation at all times. And I want to be transparent about this as well. This is not the summer. Like, if you are confirming to go to Shanghai because you think this is my chance to see the Great Wall of China, this is not the summer to confirm for a program because you have your heart set on one of the excursions that's listed there. The reality is that we're going to have to be flexible. Something might come up. The Louvre might be closed this summer when you go on your program. So I just want to be transparent about that. It doesn't mean that you won't have this rich, textured experience in your city, because again, our staff who live and work there full time, who have been living in these places during COVID, they're the ones planning your activities for you. And so, I mean, we've had our GAP students in Toulouse during this entire year, and they've had 3 activities a week, even during a very restrictive lockdown. So I just want to be transparent about that. Excursions, they are subject to change even in a normal year, but this year especially, it is a possibility. So my favorite, all these what if questions that parents love to ask, and I'm like, throw them at me, I got you. So what if my program is canceled? You will always have these options because our summer programs are covered under the CIEE Assurance Advantage. So if we cancel a program prior to departure at any point for whatever reason, you have the option to defer your scholarship to summer 2022. Even if you're going to be a senior next summer, it's totally okay. You can cancel at that time and get a refund. Or if there is space on another program that we are running and you're eligible for it, we can work to transfer you to a program for summer 2021. Again, I just want to be transparent about that last option. That's going to depend on a number of factors, like, say, God forbid, almost all of our programs get canceled and we're only running programs in like Costa Rica. Everyone can't go to Costa Rica. So I just want to be transparent that, like, the defer option and the refund option will always be available to you if our program is canceled, but that transfer option is really just going to depend on capacity and the number of programs that we're running this summer. So what if your program changes drastically before departure? So like I said, there are some things this summer that, as we're planning for our programs, we might have to make adjustments. And we don't want it to feel like we are changing things and tricking you into going on a program that you didn't sign up for. So we've taken that into account. So what does this mean? It means that if you are on a language and culture program and suddenly we say this spring, hey, we're not going to be able to run the program in Paris with host families. We're going to have to move everyone to a dorm as a group. That's not what everyone signed up for. Some people signed up for this program specifically for the host family component. So that's a major modification. And at that time, you would have those options. You could defer to next year, or you could cancel and get a refund. Say we let you know this spring, hey, all of our classes are going to be remote from these beautiful locations all over the world. Some students will still go. They would be excited to do that because it's better than being at home. Other students, that's not what they signed up for. So again, you would be able to cancel and get a refund or defer. And then that last bullet point, if we are going to have a quarantine for longer, or a soft isolation for longer than that 7 days that I talked about, then again, you would have those options available to you. So for a 4-week program, if there was a 2-week quarantine required, but we figured there's still a way to make the program enjoyable and some students still wanted to participate, we would still offer the program, but we would let people who do not want to do that have those options. So we want to be flexible with you, but we also want to be transparent about this, what these changes mean. Like, these changes don't mean, oh, we're not going to the Great Wall of China anymore, and I signed up for this program because that's what I wanted to do. we're being upfront that your excursions could change this summer. So that would not qualify as a major change, but these 3 types of changes, they would. So I'm happy to go into more detail about that at the end if there's anything that's not clear. And I'll show you our safety and security page, which really goes into these bullet points in a little bit more detail. So I actually took this picture. This is from our program in Monteverde. I took this like 2 weeks ago. It's one of our great RAs for that program. So next steps, if after getting to talk to us this week, you decide that this is something you want to do this summer if it's possible, this is what the timeline of pre-departure is going to look like. So from March to April, you'll notice once you confirm, and I'll show you how to do that in your CIEE account, there'll be a new list of pre-departure tasks. So that same CIEE account that you use to apply for your program, that's the same account you're going to use to get ready to go on that program. So each of those tasks will have a due date, and you'll be expected to follow the schedule of the due dates. If there's a task, like say you're not going to be able to get your doctor's form done by exactly the date listed, just communicate that to us. That lets us know that you're working towards getting that done. It's when you go really quiet and we don't hear from you that we get worried. In March, we'll start to discuss flights. For some programs that we are very confident about, we will share flight information at that time. We use a platform called FlightFox. They're one of our booking partners. And so they will have all of the information about the airport that students need to fly into and at what time they need to arrive. They'll have the information about the group flight option as well and which airport that is leaving out of. And so you'll be invited to book your flights through that platform. You're not required to, but they have been incredible this past year. The airline industry has been upended by COVID-19, so they've just done a really great job of tracking any changes that happen, working to get refunds for families if their flights get canceled. So we always just push students to use that platform if they can. We'll also be transparent for some of your programs. We will not be inviting you to book flights because we'll be monitoring the situation to see if the program is able to run. Booking flights is really the last step for us because we can always cancel a program and refund you prior to departure. But if you book an airline ticket and then your program is canceled, that's between you and the airline. And that is a very tiring process, and it doesn't always mean you get a refund. So I know I've already had some questions about like, I'm eager to book my flight. You're going to just have to wait until we're closer to departure. If you're going on a language and culture program, you'll take a pre-assessment so that we know the language eligibility to put you in for your classes. April 14th is when you will pay your remaining balance for your program, and you'll pay that directly in your CIEE account. In May, you will attend your pre-departure orientation, and then about 1 to 2 weeks prior to travel, you'll find out who your host family is if you're going on a language and culture program. So the big message, and we do all of our communicating with students and families through email. So my advice to everyone is check your email religiously. We send all of our updates there. If there's any changes to the schedule or any big announcements, we will be communicating with you via email. So once you know that you want to accept your scholarship award and confirm with us, there's 3 tasks that you need to take care of in order to do that. So if you have an acceptance deposit of $1,000, you will notice in your CIEE account that these are the 3 tasks that are there. All 3 of these have to be complete for you to be confirmed for a program. Otherwise, we're thinking you aren't going with us this summer, and we will probably stop communicating with you in about mid-March. So it's really important to take care of these 3 tasks by the March 3rd deadline. The do you have a passport task always trips people up because they're like, I don't have a passport, so I can't complete this task. It's fine. In the task, you tell us, no, I don't have a passport, but you put in the date that you plan to apply for the passport. So it's totally okay. Please complete that. Same with health and wellness is just letting us know about like your diet, anything that we should share with the center staff now because they're already planning for your arrival. And then the acceptance deposit is very straightforward. You can pay electronically, and it's done directly in your CIEE account. For those of you who have a remaining balance of $1,000 or less, you will notice that you do not have an acceptance deposit task because that task is set to only take $1,000 amount. So what your account will look like is actually, I'll pull this over for a second. So this is a student account. She's getting ready to, she's already confirmed. So she's got all these tasks that she'll need to complete prior to departure. Again, she can always check her program dates in her application here under her program tab. And then for those of you who need to pay your remaining balance that's less than $1,000, by the end of this week, you'll have a financial information tab. So if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of your account, you'll see this box. You'll have a billing statement, which will have this week's date, and you can click on make an online bill payment, where you can enter in manually the amount of your remaining balance, and you can pay by, credit card, debit card, ACH, and it's all done in the account. So we talked a little bit about flights already. Again, the big message is just wait, because if you book a flight outside of us sharing that flight information, it means that we cannot guarantee that you're arriving during the arrival window. And so CIEE staff are not responsible for students unless they arrive during the arrival window that we provide. So again, it's just really imperative that you just wait. We will communicate and invite people to book flights once we are confident that your program is running this summer. We are being transparent that given everything going on in the world, you will be expected to book a direct flight from the US to your program location. That's for a few reasons. We want to limit the number of airports that you're in prior to departure, but also just entry requirements. Like for some of our locations like Spain and France, the border is closed to tourists, but it's open to students. That's not the case if you fly through a place like Switzerland. So you would be denied entry there versus if you just flew directly from the US to Spain, you'd be able to enter because you have the correct paperwork. So a big question I often get is like, how much is my flight going to be? My advice is always to go onto something like Google Flights or Expedia or Orbitz, and you put in your program dates. If you are flying anywhere except for Mexico or Costa Rica, you depart the day before because you have an overnight flight to your location and you leave on the last day of your program. So I always encourage you to just put those dates in and get a sense, if I was booking this ticket now, what is the price range? But also keep in mind that we have no control over costs of flights and they can change given a lot of factors. So just keep that in mind. Also, it's just really helpful, especially given everything going on this year, when it is time to book flights, you can chat directly with FlightFox, but a good question to ask is just, what is this airline's refund policy? Because you just want to be, there's always a little bit more peace of mind booking with an airline that, even if this program gets canceled, it's okay. I'll be able to get a credit or a refund for this flight that I'm booking at this time. You'll also be enrolled in something called Canvas. That will happen later this spring. And again, we will give a window of when that will happen via email or in your CIEE account. But this course is really just to prepare you for travel. It'll talk about the staff roles, who's going to be there when you go on program, what the rules are, discipline. We will talk about what to expect on travel day. Something that's really important to note is that for language and culture programs, you are going to be required to have your own technology because that first week, right, you're going to be in online classes. So we will provide you with a form if you need to request technology from your school to take on this trip. We will assist you with that, but that's just something to keep in mind at this time. We'll also in that pre-departure course talk about, fundraising, how much money do you really need to bring, what's included, what's not. The answer is everything is mostly included once you go on programs, except for your extras like souvenirs and snacks. And then the pre-departure course is a chance for you to interact with the students who are going on your program. So we are not able to connect you all like via email because there's too many of you, but once you get into that course, that's when everyone's like, hey, let's exchange information, and you get to start going back and forth with people and seeing like, is there someone from your area who's also going on your program? Yep, so we talked about this. Again, we'll talk about like how are you going to get around on your program, important like cultural differences, how do you greet people, the tips for packing. We'll share your packing list in your CIEE account prior to departure. So I hope the big takeaways from this is that we do all of our communicating via email in your CIEE account. So just please check both of those constantly. Okay, so I want to open it up. That's perfect. We have a good 30 minutes for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look.
Yeah, Emily, this is Pierre. There's a few questions around group flights that keep on coming back. And also some I'm not sure how would you answer that around catching COVID in country and what are the refund policies, like if there is any details we can share at this point about like,
Yep.
would you, what would happen if you catch COVID? What happens to the group? If you could go over that, that would be great.
Yep. So let's talk about flights first. So always in a normal year, non-COVID, the big question, we offer two options. You can choose to fly yourself to where you live, to the program location. We'll give you a window. So like say you're going to Costa Rica, we'll say you have to arrive at San Jose Airport between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. on these dates, and you have to depart after 2 p.m. on this date, on the last day of the program. And as long as you book your flight and arrive during that time, we share all the flight information with the staff, and they spend that first day just picking students up from the airport. The other option is we'll say, there's a group flight with a CIEE chaperone leaving out of this airport. Would you like to book your child on that flight? It often means that if you don't live in New York or Miami or one of these major hubs, you might have to take a domestic flight to go meet the gateway flight. And then you travel the international leg with a CIEE chaperone. The one caveat to that, we're planning to offer that this summer. The only piece that is potentially a barrier there is if a program like Spain allows our students to enter, I wouldn't be able to enter. I'm not a student, I'm a staff, and I'm technically a tourist. And so there is a possibility that for some of our programs this summer, adult chaperones would not be able to travel with the students on the group flight. We've thought about this, we're aware of it. The good news is that, even if there's not an adult, the plan is to still share a single flight or a few flights for students to book on, so that it's not just one student going over on their own, but there's a group of students on a flight traveling together. Because I think that's really the anxiety where it comes in for a lot of people, is I don't want to be navigating this airport by myself, and that alleviates that. And we will share that information with families. So that's for flights. The second question, we have planned these programs understanding that we can mitigate risk as much as we can, but the reality is we cannot guarantee that someone does not fall ill with COVID on program. And so that is why these plans are in place. That's why, if you are in a shared accommodation, you have your own room. And the reality is, if you are sick, you are not participating with the program for at least 2 weeks. Once you test negative, you would be able to rejoin your group. But that's the reality, because we have to keep the rest of the group safe. In terms of refunds, I don't think I can answer what that would look like. My gut is that the student is already on the program, so you wouldn't be getting a refund because there's cost associated with everything that a student does while they're on program. But also there's been questions too about if student tests positive prior to coming back to the US, right? The good news is that iNext insurance, which all students get as part of their tuition, it's not an extra cost, that covers COVID-19 as well. So any medical care that students need to seek, even additional lodging if a student needs to stay after the program because they have tested positive, that is covered as part of their insurance. I know this firsthand because I was looking into it when I was about to travel, and I needed to make sure that I was going to be covered should something happen to me. So all of this is in place. We're hoping that we don't have to utilize any of these protocols that we put in place and that our staff are prepared to carry out, but we would be reckless to not consider those scenarios for our students. So Pierre, how do you want to like tell me the questions that you think need to be answered, or should I just go down the list?
Sorry, I was caught up in answering in writing. So you can do a quick scan. I feel like there's a lot of questions about homestay as well. Will I be able to be paired with someone I'm traveling with? Maybe talk a little bit more about, COVID policies around host families.
Mm-hmm.
How-
So you, in that health and wellness form, that's the space where you can say like, I want to have a roommate or I don't. We can't guarantee that we can honor your request, but we have it. For some locations like Kyoto comes to mind, the apartments tend to be smaller. So you tend to be the only student in your host family's home. Other locations, it's more common to have a roommate in your host family's home. The other thing to say about host families, I think people get this idea in their mind when they hear that word family, that it's like, I'm going to go abroad and have a mom and a dad, and there's going to be like a host sibling that's my age. And just like our families here in the US, our host families all over the world, they come in many different shapes and sizes. You might have an older couple who are retired, who have opened up their home to a student. And a lot of times parents are like, oh, I don't want that. And then I explain like, no, you really do, because the retired couple, like they have more time to spend with your student. Like they're home, if you're in that family, both family members might be going off to work. So we just tell everyone to keep an open mind. You will find out who your host family is, again, 1 to 2 weeks prior to going. And at that time, you can reach out to them. I always tell people, just keep in mind, like response times all over the world are very different. So if they don't email you back immediately, like just relax, they will get back to you. And our center staff are there. So that's the really great thing, is that our center staff, they work for CIEE full time. They're invested in you having this amazing experience, and they speak English and they speak the language of where you're going. So they're there to be like that in between. Like if there's something going on, maybe it's a breakdown in communication, they will come over and they will help you sort it out. If it's very rare, but if there's a situation where it's not working out, that's why the center staff is there. They can move students to a different host family if needed. So you're in good hands. And you also have your program leaders, who are American teachers who we hire to be your chaperones. I'm a former teacher here in New York City, and then I was a program leader, and now I work for CIEE full time. So your program leaders are, again, they're there to be that bridge between your US culture here and the country that you're going to, where you probably don't speak the language fluently and you might be homesick, you might not, you might be having trouble adjusting. They're there to check in on you and to make sure you have everything you need. They're your family while you're abroad as well. Okay. How does Wi-Fi data work? All of the places that you're staying, whether it's a host family or a shared location, will have Wi-Fi. You don't have to get an international data plan. You can definitely keep your phone in airplane mode. But what's most common is we take you to get a local SIM card and put it in your phone so that you have a local number while you're abroad. Will someone be meeting us at the airport? So again, if you're flying over alone or like not with the chaperoned group, CIEE staff will have your flight information and they will be there to retrieve you from when you come out of customs. Is there evidence that a host family neglecting their duty? Oh, wait, Pierre, I don't know what, it's like moving as I'm reading them. Okay. Is there?
It's when new ones are being added.
Okay.
Just scroll back up.
Okay. Is there evidence that a host family is neglecting their duties or creating an unsafe environment while on program? What is the procedure for getting students out of that situation? Again, that's why our center staff are there. They would go and investigate that situation immediately, and they would determine whether it's something that can be remedied easily, or if it's something severe, the student is removed and put with a new host family. What is the possibility of being able to switch sessions between 2 and 1? You would just need to email us. Typically, your scholarship is for the program you were accepted to and the session you were accepted to. But if it's like you're still in school or something like outside of your control like that, just email us and we can make that switch. What is the likelihood that a study abroad student is sent back due to COVID risk? So I think this is asking like what happens if things get really bad while they're on program and then we cancel the program and send students home. That is not that's not our policy. By the time we decide to run a program, we are very confident that students will be there for the duration of the program. But even so, we don't subscribe to this belief that it's smart to send, like if there's a risk there that we're going to then disperse and everyone's going to scatter back to the US. You know, we would keep students in place with either their group in the shared accommodation or in their host family's home. And that goes into the planning process of the programs so that we don't have a repeat of what happened last March, I think, when everything, suddenly there was like borders are closing and everyone's scrambling to leave. And so that goes into our planning process with students. About how many people will be going to South Korea. So I don't want to get into specifics about like the group size. If you have a question about that, I would just email our HS Abroad team. I want to keep the questions more, you know, for the whole group. Do we have to keep our masks? Oh. Do we have to keep our masks on in our dorms, host families' homes? No, in your host family's home, you are this is your bubble, if you want to call it that. So the answer is no after that soft isolation. And it's the same for your dorm. If you have 2 passports, one American and one from another country, can use the non-American passport if the American passport does not arrive before the due date. That's fine. The only thing is that if you're traveling on a passport that's not the US, we just always tell you you have to do the due diligence to make sure that you don't need a visa to enter the country that you're going to. Okay, I looked up the flights and the only way to get to a city is a layover in another city. I'm going to Sevilla. So again, we want you to have a direct flight to your country, not necessarily your city location. So like, it's okay if you fly from the US to Madrid and then Madrid on to Barcelona. It's not okay to fly from the US to Switzerland to Madrid to Sevilla. Answered that. If we have a roommate, is it guaranteed that our roommate identifies as the same gender as us? Yes, boys and girls would not be placed together as roommates. What is the protocol if a student tests positive or gets sick while abroad? Who will stay with the student if they are too sick to travel home? The center staff are prepared to support students on program while they're in country should they get sick, even if that means after the program has ended. Even if my program does not get canceled and I willingly withdraw, will I get a refund? This is a really good question. The answer is no. So again, if the program is scheduled to run this summer and we don't modify it in any of those ways that we discussed about like classes being fully remote or the host family component like totally changing, and you just say, I don't want to go this summer, that's not the same. And the reason is you have to understand there's a lot of planning and costs that for each student that we anticipate on a program going with us this summer. And so that's why we want to have this space now to discuss all your questions. And if you're feeling uncomfortable about this summer, this might not be the summer to accept a scholarship to study abroad. And that's totally okay. If you are a current freshman or sophomore, you can apply again next year. But we don't want you to feel like pressured to accept your scholarship if you're feeling uncomfortable about traveling during this time, which it's totally fine to feel that way. Everyone has a different tolerance for risk, but this might not be the summer to accept your scholarship and make this big commitment. Will the restrictions on classes that may be present or not affect other aspects of the program, such as outside of class time? I don't know if I understand that question. I think this is asking like, if there's local restrictions, how will that impact the quality of the program? And again, we are planning our excursions and activities to abide by local restrictions. But I think, again, that's why I'm trying to be transparent. Like if you're going on a program for a specific activity, it's not a guarantee because again, things can change on the ground. Is there a dress code? Only if you're going to places like if you go to visit like a church, you know, and there's a certain dress code to a landmark that you're going to. Other than that, no, we're not policing what you're wearing. We will tell you in your pre-departure what is typical of your culture to wear so that you don't feel uncomfortable, but we're not gonna, not a dress code. Does the host family tend to our dietary restrictions? Yes, and that's why when you confirm, one of those tasks is your health and wellness, and that's where you let us know, like, I'm a vegan, I'm allergic to shellfish, so that we can start planning for that now. If ever were the United States to close their border due to COVID while we are still abroad, what will happen? Good question. The good news is, as a US citizen, even if the US like closes our border to international travelers, you as a US citizen can always return to the US. So we will get you home. The tricky part, and what we saw this spring, is like if flights start getting canceled or countries close their border, but that is all part of the planning process for us. If we have a sense or an indication from our local staff that that's possible prior to departure, we're canceling the program. We have a very low tolerance for risk. We don't want you guys getting stuck. So that goes into our planning process. Are students allowed to leave on their own in their free time once they are at their location? So you, especially if you're on a global discovery program, you're together as a group for like your activities and all of your stuff. So you're not really having a lot of free time. You go with your chaperones though, places, and they're happy to take you around. If you're on a language and culture program, you get yourself to and from school every day, and you get yourself to and from activities. If you get done with an evening activity before dinner, you are allowed to like do things, but you have to let your host family know what you're doing, and you have to let your program leaders know what you're doing, and you have to check in with them once you're doing the activity and when it's over, and you're not allowed to go alone. And that is totally up to the discretion of the local staff. And if there's like local restrictions or anything that they deem a reason not to have free time, they will cancel it.
Can you talk more about that, Emily? There are a lot of questions about how free time works and
Yep.
how long am I going to commute alone to class, etc.
Yes. So especially for language and culture programs, the answer is yes. You are commuting on your own to and from school every day. For some students, that's really overwhelming. When I did this program in China, in Beijing, a lot of my students had never been on a train before, and they had to take the subway like 45 minutes on their own. But they did it. And the good news is the first week of the program, your host family takes you to and from school so that you know how to get there. And then again, that's why our program leaders are there. You have a local phone that we give you. So if you get lost or you're scared, you call them up and they will come and find you. We also tend to cluster students in the same areas. So you tend to like meet up with people in the program and commute with them. So I don't want that to be overwhelming, but I just want to be realistic that, you know, your host family is not going to be dropping you off at school in a car. That's a very American thing. It's not going to happen in the rest of the world. The typical schedule for language and culture is you go to class in the morning, then you have lunch together, and then you have your activity in the afternoon. And then it's like that time after your afternoon activity before you go home for dinner that you do have a little bit of time. In that first week, it's structured, and especially because you're not going to be mixing during COVID with the whole group. So that free time is going to be you and your small cluster and your program leader, and you guys can decide what you want to do or if you want to go home. As the program progresses, if you show that you guys are a mature and responsible group, you're following the rules, then your program leader does not have to go with you. If you want to go walk along, I'm trying to pull a good, if you want to go walk along the river in Sevilla, that's okay. You just have to let them know. and then you have to tell your host family, hey, I'm going to do this. It's the same here in the US. You have to tell your family what you're doing before you do it, and then you have to check in when you get back. If you are showing that you're not responsible enough for that, they'll cancel free time, and you'll just go from your activity in the afternoon home to your host family. So I hope that answers it. With global discovery programs, it's really different because you guys are together as a group. You tend to go to your activities, you're transported together. You're not like, it's not the same day to day. And so you're more with your program leaders. So it's not as big of a question. All right, let's see. Would it be difficult? Oh, I love this one. Would it be difficult to communicate with the host family? What if they don't speak English and I don't speak their language? It's totally common. That's why we have you go abroad, is that's how you learn. So even if your host family speaks English, we are going to tell them that they need to speak to you in the language of the country you're going to. It's totally okay. They're used to having American students who don't speak their language, so you'll do a lot of pointing. Sometimes their children will speak English and they will help you out, but for the most part, that's part of the program. If there's something serious that you need help with translating, your program leaders and the center staff are there to support you. Yeah. What happens if your flight gets delayed? Such a logistical question. FlightFox, that's why we really like booking with them, because we as the CIEE staff can see everything going on with your flights. And our center staff will know that it's delayed and they'll be there to pick you up when you get there. The high school students still consider minor. How are they traveling alone? Homestay safe for them. So I think we discussed homestays and safety. In terms of traveling alone, you know, it depends on the airline. 14-year-olds are considered unaccompanied minors. But we will share all that information. Typically, high school students are able to, you know, once they're 15 and over, they are able to travel internationally alone. And if there is an airline that does not allow like under 18-year-olds to travel independently, we would advise you not to book on that flight unless we knew that there was a CIEE chaperone who would be there to serve as the adult for the students. So we'll share all that information when it comes time to book flights. Will students be able to fly back separately or travel longer after the program? Are we required to leave with CIEE? You're not required to leave with us. In a normal year, you know, that's fine. Sometimes families come over and you guys go off and have vacation. There's paperwork we ask you to fill out beforehand about who's gonna like basically pick you up from that last day of the program. Or, you know, if you're flying someplace else, it's okay, because remember, you can fly yourself anywhere after the program. The only piece that I'll have you keep in mind this summer is that, like, if there's a paperwork required to enter a country, that paperwork will only be good for the duration of our program. So, you know, and it might be that you can go to a place, but your family can't come visit you because they're a tourist. So I just want to put that out there for this summer. What is the situation with Japan? Japan is still not opened its border to tourists. We are hopeful that there will be an exemption for students, but Japan is in that group of countries, like a lot of them for right now are, if this program were to start next week, it would not be able to run. So that's why we're going to continue to monitor the situation. And then if we feel this spring that it's not going to change, we will cancel your program. And if we see that it is going to change, we will let you know and we'll book flights and we'll continue on this journey. To clarify, if we are in a summer program for language and culture, we will have to find our own means of transportation. Not your own means, but you'll be taking public transportation. So that means maybe you're close enough to the school that you can walk, but maybe you're far enough that you have to take the subway or the train or a bus. But again, your host family will show you how to get to school during that first week, so that it's not just you like lost in Spain by yourself. But yes, you are responsible for getting yourself to and from school. Will we receive an itemized list of expenses? No, but we will let you know about how much to budget for spending money. Each location is different. Some locations, it's advantageous to students to have the US currency and to change it over, your money goes farther, and in other places it's not. all of your meals, all your activities, all of your housing, everything that you need is taken care of in your tuition, which you take care of before you go. So students aren't paying for things out of pocket when they're on program. You're really just buying souvenirs and snacks. Those are the two S's that I see students spending money on all summer. Everything else we take care of. What happens if they change to all online classes after arrival? Okay, I'm glad you brought this up because I'm going to bring this back. So again, on this what if page, what's really important in this second bullet point is your program changes drastically before departure. So these are changes, you're eligible for a refund if these things happen prior to you going on the trip, because again, we don't want to like lock you into a program that you didn't want to go on. But the reality is that there are costs associated with everything the students do once they're actually there. So the refund policy would not apply if suddenly they have to go online for the duration of the program once they are there. And we want to be transparent about that. Because my daughter's program to Morocco was canceled last year. She's deferred this year. I felt uncomfortable with her going this year. Is it possible to cancel and get a refund? You would need to email the HS Abroad inbox. If a student is not comfortable for any valid reason meeting the host family virtually or after the first week with them, would it be possible to switch? So again, we talked about what happens if there's any situation with host families where it's not working out, center staff are there, and they will make the appropriate change. Will we have to take a COVID test when coming back to the US? Yes, that is the reality right now, and we anticipate that will be the reality this summer. So we will organize the COVID testing for students in country, but that cost of getting that COVID test will be on the student. So we will communicate prior to departure how much that COVID test will be, depending on the location that they're going to, but that will be a requirement to come back to the US. Will there be an opportunity to interact with locals in global discovery programs? After that first 7 days, yes. And that will look, that'll be outdoors with masks on. You visit some like nonprofits a lot of times, or you hear from speakers on global discovery programs. So that is an integral part of the program, but we'll just have it be COVID safe for this summer. You won't be like, having a dance class with the local community this summer. Let's put it that way. Will we have to take a COVID test? Okay, we talked about that. What materials do we need for school? You will need technology. So you'll need we really recommend a laptop. If it can't be a laptop, then it needs to be like a tablet. We really don't want you just using your phone for online class because we really want you to be successful. Can you get dinner by yourself? No, you go eat with your host family every evening for dinner. And if you're with the Global Discovery program, you eat dinner together. It's very communal. Am I correct that for students who applied for programs in the 4 unconfirmed countries, we can wait until mid-March to decide and commit to the program or not? Yes, if you are accepted to China, Australia, Czech Republic, or Germany, there's no steps in your account right now to do. We're just telling you like, hold tight, and then we'll communicate what's going on with your programs in about mid-March, and we'll discuss like your timeline and when you need to confirm. So you're just kind of in limbo waiting right now. Is there a curfew for language programs? There's a curfew for all programs, and it's set by the center staff, and they'll communicate that to you during pre-departure. How will we arrive to our host families once we arrive in the country? We have an orientation first. Well, that's in a normal year. In a normal year, yeah, we have orientation as a group. I guess with COVID, that will probably likely not happen. Either host families we would take you to a location, and then your host family would come there and pick you up. But CIEE staff will be the ones to pick you up from the airport, and then we'll pass you off to your host families. So you're not like in the airport on WhatsApp, like looking for these strangers. Will public transportation be included in the cost that CIEE takes? Yes. We will give you your Metro card or your bus pass, whatever it is. Will we need to get a COVID test upon entering Spain? So we talked about this. Even regardless of what the local restrictions are for a country, you have to get a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to departure for CIEE. Certain countries have even more stringent requirements. So like Spain, you have to have a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to arrival. So you have to get it like really quickly here in the US. We'll communicate all of that prior to departure so that you know exactly what you need to do in order to be able to enter your country. What would be the protocol if we get COVID less than 2 weeks before we are supposed to go home to America from Spain? So again, you would be quarantined from the group in your host family's home. You'd be looked after by your host family and our local staff. If you needed to seek medical treatment, we would accompany you for all of that. And if you were still positive and couldn't come home, we would take care of you until you returned to the US. What if there are no students in our area going to the same location as us? That's very possible. Sometimes you will be the only student, not only from your school, but maybe from your state. Again, with the group flight, we'll share which airport that flight is departing out of, so you can travel from where you live to that gateway airport and then travel with the group. Do we have to buy chargers with different ports, our own SIM cards? You should plan to bring, well, that's part of your pre-departure course. We'll let you know what, converters you need. You're responsible for buying that on your own. When you get to your location, that's when we'll take you to get your SIM cards. How do I communicate with my family back home if there is an emergency, or just communicate in general? So like I said, you have Wi-Fi. So a lot of kids just talk to their family through like iMessage, FaceTime, WhatsApp, all that good stuff. If for some reason you're not able to communicate with them, our local staff, they have like a emergency cell phone, and you can dial a number here to the US, no issues. And then your family also has an option where if they're trying to get in touch with you and you're not answering, there's a 24/7 number they can call with CIEE, and then we'll call the center staff and get you guys in touch. Okay, if you are going on a language and culture program, do you also have the option of a dorm or shared accommodation? No, all students going on language culture programs will live with host families unless we change that aspect for all students on that program and transition you to a dorm or a hotel. And we would let you know about that change prior to departure, because again, that would allow you to defer or cancel, because that's not the program you signed up for. Just triple checking that the Global Discovery programs are all in English and have no language requirement, particularly the Copenhagen program. Correct, there is no language requirement. Some of your speakers might only speak the local language, but there will always be a translator for any of the activities. What's the average amount of kids on a program? It can range. Programs can be as small as 15 kids, and they can be as big as 150 kids. It really just depends on the program. The good news is, especially this summer, it doesn't matter how big your program is, because you're going to be in that small, soft isolation for the first 7 days, where you'll only be with like 10 to 15 students. And even after that soft isolation, we're not going to be walking around Spain as a group of 150 people. It's just not possible. So that's why I really don't want us to worry too much about the program size, because we hire our staff based on the number of students that we have. Is the iNext insurance only applicable to US citizens? No, I think anyone can buy iNext insurance, but you get it automatically through us. We enroll you, and we send you the instructions for how to, opt into it. So don't worry too much about that. Do we book the flights the day before the program starts? Yes, if you are going to anywhere but Mexico or Costa Rica, you depart the day before your program starts. So just keep that in mind as you're planning your summer. Do we have to have prior knowledge of the language? If you're going on a Spanish or French program, you do, and that was a prerequisite. Everything else, it's okay if you are a beginner and don't speak the language at all. Okay. Are there direct flights to Japan from the US? Yes, there are direct flights to Tokyo from the US. So China programs, is the deposit plus surcharge due now or not until mid-March? It's not due now. It's not due until you find out in mid-March what's going on with your program. Will my host family be quarantining before I get there? It's not a requirement that host families are quarantining, but they are expected to be you are expected to form a bubble with your household. So that means limiting exposure to people outside of the household prior to your arrival and during the program, but it's not a requirement. And the reason is we wouldn't have a way to follow up and monitor that for all of our families. It is discussed heavily in our orientation and training with them because again, we want to limit risk as much as possible, but it is not a requirement. If you are in a hostel, can you request a private room for specific reasons? Everyone will have their own room for the first 7 days for that soft isolation period. After that, I don't think we can guarantee private rooms just based on accommodation size. I already answered that. If a family member comes to the city of our program, would we be able to meet with them during free time, like meet them outside in the park or in the mall or something? I've had people ask this before. The expectation is you should not be having visitors while you're on the program because first of all, there's no guarantee that when they come, you're gonna have free time. The dates that you're on that program, you're a CIEE student on that program. Now, sometimes students study abroad in like a location where there's a family member they haven't seen in like years, or there's, some extraordinary, circumstance. We always say, if you discuss it with your host family and your host family is willing to like help organize it in their home, fine. If the host family is like, no, I don't have time or this, that, it's totally up to the host family because they are your family while abroad. So I wouldn't like book a family vacation to this location until you find out who your host family is and they approve it. Should we have spending money transferred to our country currency? We will take you to like withdraw local currency during orientation of the program. Some students choose to exchange money before they come over just to have a little bit. That's fine. But our in-country staff will take you to get currency when you arrive. So we meet the family 1, 2 prior. Okay, I can't tell what this question is. You will find out who your host family is 1 to 2 weeks prior to departure. At that time, you can make contact with them. Can parents attend? No, your parents cannot attend the program. This is a chance for you to be on the program with us. Sometimes families like come and do their own vacation and then meet you at the end, or you guys do vacation before and then they drop you at the start. That's fine. But again, during the dates of the program, you are a CIEE student and you cannot have visitors. I know you said how much money you'll find out to bring later, but in the past, how much have students brought on average? In a typical, I think we typically say like $200 is a good, like a good, easy number. You should think about your habits though, as a consumer. I know kids who we were on a deserted island, there was nothing to buy. And like anytime we went anywhere, they were like souvenirs. So it's like, if you're that type of kid, then maybe you need more than that. But everything you need on the program is provided for you. So, you could bring a lot less than that and be totally fine. What we do advise is that you have a debit card or a way to withdraw money if you have an emergency or, for some reason you need to have more money on you, and we'll cover that in pre-departure. Where will the group flights be located at? We will share all that information with you via email, and then you'll also be able to access it through your Flightfox invitation. So basically we can have our flight to anywhere within our designated country. I mean, most of our programs run in or near the capital, like where the flight would be flying into anyway. The only things that come to mind to me is like Sevilla or Toulouse, these like smaller cities where you fly to, you know, like Madrid or Paris, and then you take a smaller plane to those locations. But again, we want you to take a direct flight from the US to the country of where your program is running. If the program is in a city without a main international airport, will CIE provide transportation from the capital to the city? Typically, you're taking a connecting flight to get to your program location. So that's why I say when we do share flight information, we will tell you, you need to arrive at this airport during these times if you're not going on the group flight. And then CIE, of course, will organize all your transport once we pick you up from the airport. If we're going to Korea, would there be someone with us who translate when we are not in free time? Yes, your program leaders and the local staff. Would CIE be able to secure vaccines for students who want to be vaccinated before participating? No, I wish CIE could procure a vaccination for me as a staff member, but we don't have that pull here in the US. If a program gets canceled and we are currently a senior in high school, what will happen? Will we be able to go on the trip as a college freshman? Unfortunately, if you're a senior and the program gets canceled this year, you will get a refund because for our summer programs, you have to be a current 9th, 10th, 11th, or 12th grader. So by that point, you would be a college student, and our scholarships, they don't come from CIEE. They actually come from a donor who wants you to have this opportunity. And so she ties that money to high school programs only. So it wouldn't transfer to a college program. So hopefully your program can run this summer. If you feel uncomfortable attending this year, can you defer your scholarship until next year? At this time, no, because technically right now your program is still running. So if you are like, I'm gonna confirm for this year and like hope for the best and maybe my program will get canceled and then I'll be able to defer it, I wouldn't do that. You're only able to defer your scholarship if we cancel your program prior to departure, or like what's on the screen, those 3 components are drastically changed before you go. So, you know, if you're not comfortable with this summer, my advice is to decline your scholarship and apply again next year. Will technology provided for global discovery students? It's not global discovery programs, there's not a need for technology as much as with language and culture. A lot of stuff is done like by hand and notebooks. It will tell you in your packing list, you know, if we recommend technology, but it's not a requirement as much as language and culture. Okay, where are we at time? So it's 8:12. My voice. I would say, Pierre, I can stay on until 8:30. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks everyone for hanging in there. It's a lot of questions, so we appreciate everyone's patience.
It's really like, I feel like I get through so many and then I scroll and I'm like, oh my God,
I know, we're just halfway through it.
Okay, I answered that. How much money? Okay, I answered that. Here we go.
We'll try to get back to everyone, every unanswered questions. I think if you left your name with the question, we'll try to get back to you in a mail merge.
Yes. Okay, we talked about curfew. So students, or does that vary according to the host family? Is there a curfew for is there a curfew for homestay students, or does that vary by the host family? It's the same for everyone in the city. It's not like one person has a cool host family and one person's is like super strict. We tell everyone curfew's 9 o'clock, and then the host family enforces it.
There are a few questions, Emily, about extending their stay to like see a relative or friends there after the program. I
Yeah,
usually answer those questions saying it's allowed, but you have to be mindful of visa requirements.
yep,
If you want to talk more about that.
yep. This year especially, like if this was a normal year, the answer is usually yes, right? Except in locations like Pierre's saying where it's like you're getting a visa to come, so you have to stay and leave during the dates of the program. Sure, whatever you want to do after the program is fine as long as we get like consent from your parents beforehand. We'll release you on that last day and you can go do whatever you want. This year though, especially, I just want to put it out there that it's going to be very hard, I think, to have this free travel going on. So, if your whole reason for confirming and going to Paris is because you want to then jump off from there and do this other thing with your family, just keep in mind that that might not be possible. So I just want to reiterate what Pierre said. If our program is able to run and we're able to provide paperwork for you to enter the country as a CIEE student, that paperwork will only be good for the duration of the program. We'll have a better sense of what that is in the spring, but that's just something to keep in mind. But if local restrictions allow it, then sure, you're allowed to visit family before and after. We will just tell you, if you're not flying in, but getting dropped off where you need to be taken to on that first day of the program, and we'd get that paperwork beforehand so that we know who's bringing you to the start of the program. Same with the last day of the program. If you're not going to the airport because someone's coming to retrieve you, that's totally fine, but we would just need to get that approval ahead of time. Will there be a
follow-up question, sorry, on this is before the trip. I think that will be trickier this year just because of the testing requirements, right? So I think if you have any personal travel that you want to do, it's better after. I would say just in case we wouldn't want you to get like stuck having to quarantine in a separate location.
Yeah.
So I think it's best if you leave, unless you live outside of the US, obviously, but.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you have to have us, and then for us too, that's the other thing, like regardless of the country you're going to, our policy is you have to submit a negative COVID test 72 hours prior to departure. So if you're in another location, that could also be like really tricky. And remember, our expectation is that for that 10 days, thank you, Pierre, that's such a good question, because that 10 days before you go on your program, we're asking you to quarantine as well for the safety of yourself and the safety of the students on the program. So see your friends after the program. Okay. If we don't accept our scholarship, can we switch programs? Yes. If you have your heart set on a different program and it's not the one you got a scholarship for, you can decline your scholarship, but you would have to pay full tuition price for your program. If that's what you want to do, you should email our HS Abroad email address and we can talk about the next steps to do that. But scholarships are not transferable to a different program, so you'd have to decline your scholarship. Okay. With the tight 72-hour testing requirements, do y'all recommend locations for COVID testing here in the US? We don't. We have, what's been nice is we've had a lot of students going abroad. So like certain hubs like, New York, Chicago, LA, we have some families who've had to do tight turnaround tests. So sometimes we reach out to them to be like, what do you recommend? But the expectation is that you as the family have to do that research and find the COVID testing location prior to departure. Good news is we're telling you about this now so that you have lots of time to start that process. Could we purchase our tickets from a separate place that's not FlightFox? Yes, you can. Again, we'll share, this is where you must arrive, these dates, you can book your own ticket, that's fine. But I just want to reiterate how amazing they have been for a lot of our families, especially last year when it was like no one knew this was going to happen. Everyone booked flights and then everything changed and they worked tirelessly and got what's the percentage, Pierre? Like over 90% of families refunds, and that's hours of like waiting on the phone, following up. And they also just, they stay on top of your flight. So if your airline changes your reservation or your ticket, because that happens a lot now with COVID, like if there's not enough people booked on a flight, they cancel the route or they change the time. So it's just really nice to book with them because they're tracking all of that for you. And it's not something that you and your parents are thinking about as you're preparing to travel. So that's my one plug for them, but it is not a requirement.
There are a few questions about local friendships. It's a bit tricky to respond to that because we wouldn't necessarily want to encourage having extended contacts, outside of your homestay bubble, I would say. But in the meantime, it makes sense that you want to, make friends with outside local students and kids.
Yeah, I mean, in the past, it's definitely a huge component of our programs is you're getting to interact with local students, especially on language and culture programs. I can definitely see some scenarios where there's certain activities that you could do safely that I could see our center staffs organizing outside, but it's not going to be the same experience as in previous summers. We'll be transparent about that. You will potentially have a close relationship with your host sibling who's part of your bubble, but we can't guarantee that you'll have a host sibling in your host family's home. Okay.
I just answered a question about the webinar that's scheduled for tomorrow with our head of health, safety, and security. We will cover a lot of the materials that we saw tonight, so don't feel obligated to sign up, and we will also share a recording of that meeting tomorrow after the facts. But it will be an opportunity to also ask questions directly to our leadership team. So the head of safety will be there, the head of our programs will be there, and the head of our operations. It's just a different group. Will cover a lot of that same material because everyone is looking for specific answers. And our head of safety will also give you an overall overview of what we know of the safety landscape today and how we're approaching program planning.
I'm just looking, I'm scrolling through the questions to see. Okay, and I recognize some of these questions, like I recognize there was like a question asking for letter to apply for a visa. So I think this is a good place to mention too, like we are receiving your questions in the inbox. Just keep in mind that we just accepted about 1,200 of you. We're very excited to have you with us, but you all, rightly so, have a lot of individual questions, and we are going to follow up with you. March 3rd is not going to come and go without you having the answers to your questions. So please just bear with us. We know that it's been hard to get us on the phone lately. We're working tirelessly to make sure that everyone has everything they need to make this decision. So like Pierre said, if we didn't get to your question tonight, because I do see some that are like, I have a very specific question. Where am I going to get this answered? Like, we will follow up with you. And in your acceptance email, there was like a link for Calendly for some of us. Fortunately, like for me, I know like almost all of my appointments are booked. So I do think email is like a really great mode. We can quickly get back to you this week as well through there. We have another one of these on Thursday night as well. My colleague Nicole is going to host it. It's at 8 p.m. It's going to cover the same slides, but again, you're welcome to attend there. And then you can always call into, sorry, let me put this back.
Could we? Yeah.
I'm putting this number on. Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. I was going to say, maybe we should go back 1 minute on host family screening and safety. There are a lot of questions around what if my host family is abusive? Or you guys are screening host families?
Okay.
all legitimate concerns, but I feel we should
Yes,
just give more color on how we do things.
absolutely. So again, if we have a host family, like a family that we haven't worked with before, that reaches out to us, often they're referred to us by like a family we already work with or the local schools that we have relationships with. They get a visit from our local staff. They get a background check prior to any students coming to live with them. And again, your student does that survey about their experience, and then you as the parent do a survey about your experience. The really unique thing about our programs is that it's not us, the US staff, bringing the students over, doing this program, and then like CIEE packing up and leaving and coming back to the US. Everywhere that we run programs, we have study centers operating there all year, 24/7, running our programs. Some of you have gotten calls from our study center staff directors from Ghana, from France, from Spain, who are the ones who are operating these programs for us. And so they're the ones who know our host families. And if they're, it's really great. This year's been really great for me because I've gotten to see, as some of our high school semester and gap students prepare to depart, the center staff's thinking creatively about like, this is a good fit for this one. So they want you all to enjoy this experience with your host family. And if there is an issue, from something as small as, my host family, I don't think they understand that I don't eat meat. Like I told CIE I don't eat meat, but they're putting meat in the food. Like, tell the center staff, tell us, and they will discuss it with your host family immediately. And if it continues to be an issue that's, affecting your enjoyment of your program, we will move students. It doesn't happen often because our host families, I think it's something that's really important to know, is they're not paid extra to be host families. This isn't a side job for them. They receive a stipend for students to like for their food and their Wi-Fi, but they're doing this because they enjoy having American students come and stay with them. They might have kids and they want them to be exposed to English. Like I said, they might be an older couple who, they want to have that time with students because they have the luxury of it. But, I know it's a scary thought to send your child to live with a family across the world. And as a study abroad student, it was the thing I was the most stressed about, but it is the part of the program that students talk about the most. It is the reason why, it's half the reason why we do what we do, because we really believe this is how you have a true exchange, is through like sharing of meals, sharing of culture. So, you're right to have lots of questions about our host families, but we screen them very carefully. And especially during COVID, they have to be abreast to all of the policies that we have in place. They have to be willing to take on the risk of having a student, but also the responsibility of caring for a student should they fall ill, and they're all willing to do that. So I think that says something even more particular about our families this summer than it has in any year prior to. I do see a question, are host families going to be vaccinated? Again, just as we're not requiring our students to be vaccinated because we can't, it's the same for our host families. They will not be vaccinated prior to departure. So if that's something that is a non-negotiable for you, this might not be the summer, and that's okay. Okay.
I think one last one, and then we wrap up, and we will follow up with all unanswered questions between tomorrow and Thursday by email.
Yes. Something to keep in mind too, our office is closed on Fridays. So we will get back to you as soon as possible once we come back to the office on Monday, if you don't hear from us on Thursday. But that's our general inbox. You can always reach out to us there. And then that's our general number for our high school team as well. Let me just do a quick scan to see if there's anything. Oh, I do have a question. My daughter is entering 12th grade in the fall. If we don't choose to attend this year, will there be an option to attend a program during her 12th grade year? So keep in mind, students can only apply for a Global Navigator like need-based scholarship when they're current 9th, 10th, and 11th graders. If you're a junior this summer and your program gets canceled, we will allow you to defer your scholarship to next year. But if you decline your scholarship this year, you're going to be a senior next year, you won't be eligible to reapply. Oh, this is the last question I'm going to answer. There will always be a chaperone with students. They have emergency protocols. So there's not going to be an adult chaperone with students 24/7 of the program. Like I mentioned, with language and culture programs, you kind of want to think about it here in the US. It's like you wake up, your child goes off to school, they get themselves back. So, there's not a chaperone with them to and from their activity or their classes. Global discovery programs, like I mentioned, are a little bit different because since they're living together as a group, they're transported together to like all locations easily because we're all leaving and coming back to the same location. But, as the program goes on, they will have an opportunity to, have a little bit of free time without a chaperone if the students show that they're mature. So if that's a non-negotiable for you this summer, that my child needs to be chaperoned 24/7 by an adult, it's not a reality on our summer programs. So this might not be the fit for this year. Okay, when will they call the program off? Flights get more expensive as we get closer. We've already had personal flights canceled by the airlines, so now we're waiting to see what groups does. We understand, we know. It's this push and this pull, right? Like we don't want to cancel a program too early and then see that, oh, they were able to lift restrictions. This program could have run. I think we've gotten really good at predicting what our locations are going to do, because again, we have our local staff who live there full time, and we've been running programs this past 12 months. We've had students in France, in Spain, in Costa Rica, in Ireland, in Italy. So, I think the next 6 weeks are going to be really telling. We're going to have another wave of announcements by mid-March for those programs that we discussed earlier. But the reality is that it's an uncertain time. So I would say at least 6 weeks prior to departure, we'll make a plan, but also keep in mind that if something, as we're getting closer to departure, if a country suddenly changed their entry requirements, or we don't feel we can run the program safely, we will cancel it. We'll cancel a program up till the day before we leave if we feel that we cannot run the program safely. And that's just the reality. Okay,